Hi, everybody. Welcome
Hi.
to another session of Worldly Experience. I'm with Katherine Watier Ong, who is the owner of WO Strategies LLC, which is a boutique organic traffic consulting agency. What this company does is that it focuses on optimizing its clients' presence across any platform that has a search ranking algorithm. And she ran campaigns for organizations ranging from federal agencies, startups, and Fortune 500 companies, and more. And she also has helped a lot of websites gain more traffic, such as Cancer.gov, which she helped grow their platform from 1.5 million to nearly 5 million searches a month. So, Katherine, I'm really glad to meet you. Welcome. How are you
Thanks.
feeling?
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So, I'm really excited to dig down because I personally want to be successful in the media field, but I feel like the work that you do is very essential, but not a lot of people really know much about it. So I'm really excited to dig down and understand the importance of digital multimedia marketing. So what do you do? Like, what does your average day look like?
So I run a business as well as do the work on purpose because I really love doing SEO. So I don't want to not do that. So I do a variety of things on the marketing end. I have a newsletter. I do a daily tips for SEO, which is an audio. It's like an Alexa flash briefing or a little mini podcast. I'm about to launch another podcast. I used to run the DC search marketing meetups here in town. So I used to, it was a live event. And even before coronavirus, when I started my own business, it got really tough to kind of coordinate the event downtown. They didn't have office space, that kind of thing. So anyway, I've been missing the group because it was really great to get tips from other people in the industry and get everybody excited about the wins you've had and stuff. And so we're about to launch that podcast next week. Yeah, it's digitalmarketingvictories.com. So anyway, that'll be a monthly podcast. So I do a variety of things on the marketing end. I also um, manage leads that are coming in, so new business leads. And then I balance around five-ish clients on at one time. And so for them, I'm literally driving strategy. All of them are big, particularly this year. I picked up even bigger clients, if that was even possible. So I do work with the federal agency. I work with the Fisheries Division of NOAA. And I work directly with their team. And then I also work with a couple of big academic journals. And one of the journals has been publishing since the beginning part of the century and has digitized most of that. And for both of the journals, they're moving web platforms this year next. So that's a huge amount of work. I think we're still trying to estimate the size on the biggest one, but I do believe it's somewhere between 7 to 10 million pages, probably. So there's a lot of moving parts. The other journal's not necessarily small either. So yeah, I like to work with teams where I tend to work with science-based organizations. So folks where they're the expert in the topic and I just help them build a strategy. And they don't necessarily need to promote their websites because they're big authoritative websites, but they do have huge amount of technical issues usually. And so I help them sort out the technical issues, make sure Google can actually get to their pages, and then help them tweak their content strategy so that they appear more in Google search or YouTube search. Yeah.
Wow. So you have a lot on your plate. Could you drop the name of your podcast again? Because I want to listen to it.
Yeah. It's actually, it's called Digital Marketing Victories. And actually that's the website too, digitalmarketingvictories.com.
Amazing.
Mhm.
Yeah, I'm getting into more podcasts. So I'm working on Disgraceland, which talks about music history. So I could use a lot more on my plate when I'm crocheting. It's a good
Yeah.
time.
And then on my website, you can subscribe to my website for the daily tips too, if you're interested. So WO Strategies.com, every weekday, I drop another tip. It's usually really quick.
Oh my God, you're a marketing hero. Gosh. So it sounds like you have a lot on your plate and you're extremely passionate about it. And how did you know you would like this work so much?
So I got involved in marketing ridiculously early. So I was really involved in the 4-H program as a kid. And by the time I hit 13, I was upset that I would have to go to Massachusetts to go to a teen conference and that there wasn't one in Maine. And so my agent said, well, why don't you plan one? So I did. I planned a conference for 200 people. At the age of 13, I negotiated the hotel and got workshop speakers and marketed the thing, and 200 kids showed up. And anyway, and at that, I actually met an exchange student from Costa Rica, and my dad was a big environmentalist, and I was very passionate about the trees. I grew up in Maine. And so he was like, you have to learn about my country's trees if you love trees. Anyway, so then I got really passionate about the tropical rainforest and the destruction of the tropical rainforest. So anyway, by the time I started building a curriculum. By the time I was 16 and in high school, I'd met a environmental after school group, and we launched my Rainforest Challenge project. So I wrote a curriculum, and we used to take off time from school to give workshops and encourage other people to save the tropical rainforest. And then I built out a newsletter. We did speaking engagements. We did fairs and stuff. It was kind of crazy. And so in 94, when I built my first website, I put the curriculum online. Anyway, so marketing is in my DNA. It's also because when I was involved in 4-H, I helped actually plan a bunch of their national conferences, again, at a ripe young age of somewhere in high school. And when you go to National 4-H Conference in DC, you actually do a SWOT analysis of the 4-H program. It's the only youth organization that has young people on its board of directors. And so they engage everybody in the program in actually planning the marketing plan for 4-H, like the entire plan. So you do an analysis in your community, you bring that to the conference, then you learn how to do strategic planning. So I learned how to do strategic planning at like 15 and then taught it at 16 or whatever the ages were. So all of that's in my DNA. So I went to school for marketing. I did marketing in Hampshire. And then when I went to graduate school, I thought, okay, well, old school marketing is, I wouldn't say dying, but with the internet, I thought it was really important to know the digital end of things. And I already had an interest, obviously. So I decided to pivot and look at marketing technology and using technology to market. And so my thesis was focused on the weirdest technology I could find at the time, which was the first wearable computer called the Zyber back in 2003, well before Google Glass. And I did an analysis of why consumers would want to adopt a wearable computer, basically. And along the way, I was working at the same time. So I worked through both undergrad and grad. And so as I was working full-time and going to school part-time with my graduate program, I maneuvered my career into marketing roles. So here I was at the Points of Light Foundation. I was heading up as the director of marketing and sales for 1-800-volunteer.org. And so I was sort of doing a little internet marketing, sort of. But there was only one of me and I had no staff and no contractors. So I was very busy selling the thing. And we fell off of Google one day. So the CFO comes to my office. He's like, we're not on Google. And I need to know why. And I'm like, oh my gosh, my previous SEO experience was like 12-page static websites. This is this huge home-built CMS system dynamic thing. It was like a Match.com for volunteering. It was really robust. I said, you're going to have to send me to a search show and I'll come back with a plan. So they sent me to Search Engine Strategy Chicago, which was a popular search show. It's not happening anymore. But back at these shows, they used to do live audit sessions. Does anybody want their website looked at? And I said, yeah, me. I was like the first up. And so they automatically kind of pointed out a few things about my site that were problematic that in some instances developers put in place. But I got hooked. I spent the rest of the week creating a plan, and there you go. I don't know why it took me so long to find SEO because my undergrad was in social psychology, but from then on, I've been doing SEO for about 15 years.
Wow. So I have two questions.
Yeah.
First of all, what is a Zyber? Is it like, what is that?
It's the first wearable computer. It was originally sold to the military, but they had a consumer element that was available. It was mostly used for Japanese businessmen in the subway. And when they moved it here to the US, it didn't do as well.
And you said it was made in the 90s, right?
Mm-hmm.
So like, was it in a fanny pack?
Oh, no, it was.
Was it like,
yeah, it was,
yeah.
Yeah. So it was a headband that went across this part of your forehead and a screen that was down over one eye. And then it did have a wire to a pack that had a joystick sort of interface. And then the worst part is that it had a Windows platform on it. And so in order to navigate anything, you had to go up and over. Oops, so lost the drop down. Up and over. And then it was built for Japanese businessmen. So when I tried to wear it, it fell off my forehead. So I did a 3-day sort of trial with it. And I gave it to my friend Joe, who's Korean, because he was the only one who could wear it. So he wore it for 3 days to see what it would be like to wear a wearable computer.
So it was like controlling like how to get a little prize out of the claw.
It was with your thumb, but yes, it was like that. Can you imagine trying to like walk down the street and navigate a Windows drop-down interface at the same time to do what you needed to do?
Give me 1 second, I'll got the directions.
And this is before wireless data networks. The cell phone networks weren't like they were. So you had to stand next to a wire, like free Wi-Fi, to do anything with the thing.
Wow, that sounds hard.
Well, it's funny because the board was so excited. They hadn't done any consumer studies. And they're like, oh my gosh, I have a graduate student willing to do a consumer study. And then when I came through with the findings, they were like, yeah, okay. I didn't do anything with them because unfortunately it wasn't good news. It was like, this thing's just not going to work.
It sucks. So it sounds like you were extremely busy and very motivated to keep with this dream since high school. So what were your tips to stay motivated and really put yourself in this industry at such a young age?
Join the 4-H program? I don't know. That's my little plug for 4-H. Yeah, I mean, I was really blessed because that first extension agent, I just got very passionate. And the first extension agent gave me the Kids Guide to Social Action, which is basically, they still publish it, I think, but it had templates for everything you needed to do. So it would have a grant application template and a press release template. And you could literally flip through this thing and then just exactly. So I applied for grants. I got grant money. I applied for in-kind donations. We flew to a conference in Colorado. I pitched press. I got covered by NBC, PBS, and NPR in Maine. NBC did a 6-minute segment on us.
That's crazy.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think part of it was just being naturally curious, but then also having an adult that was like, go for it.
Oh,
go for it.
Nice.
So I was just very lucky because all of it was that, you know, so for all of high school, for the most part, my high school itself was slightly problematic, which is why I ended up in Hampshire. But all of that was just like, go for it. Mm-hmm. We support you. This sounds like a great idea. Just do it. But I'm not quite sure where I got the utter fascination with marketing. I have a real fascination with psychology and social psychology and persuasion. I spent a lot of time at Hampshire. My entire Div 2 was focused on that. So I was just really focused on how to persuade people from a micro moment to a macro moment. So genocides fascinate me too. You know what I mean? So everywhere from child development, psychology stuff, straight through to genocide. Like I just am fascinated with that whole gamut. And a lot of that is marketing. Is trying to figure out like how to persuade somebody to buy something, change their behavior. How exactly do you do that? What levers do you pull? How do you measure? That's always been my passion, and it's still my passion. I just do it with digital marketing now.
Wow. That's really cool. It's like, it sounds interesting because, you know, if you don't really dig deep into it, it sounds like, you know, sociology and psychology seem so different from media and like marketing, but really they're within the same field, but just different skills applied to it. But so it sounds like you use a lot of psychology within your daily job. So do you use, like, how do you prepare yourself for work, like every day? Like, do you look into persuasion? Do you look into the sociology aspects of things? Like, what helps you create these plans for your clients?
So one of the things that I do every day is, this is an industry where it changes all the time. So Google changes the algorithm. I think it's 9 times a day. And that's just Google. And obviously my clients need to be found in more than just Google. There's Bing, and then there's YouTube and Spotify, Amazon. It kind of depends on your product, right? But so it moves a lot, and will be horribly behind if you don't stay up to date with all of the search and social news. So I happen to like learning a lot. And so that fits very well with me. I never need to go back and get another degree because I'm literally self-learning constantly, which for me is perfect. But when it comes to creating a plan for the client, all of these things are personalized to the end user because of massive amounts of machine learning. So every single platform, every single search engine. And so your plans have to be stellarly focused on your end consumer. So the very first thing you need to figure out is who are you talking to? What exactly are they like? So you create a persona around the major groups of people you're trying to market. Do research to try to get actual feedback from your end user about you as a brand, the product, the marketplace. Do competitor analysis because you're competing against every other person that wants to appear for that topic in search. And so you're kind of running blind if you don't take a look at who's also appearing. And Google knows more about your end consumer than you probably do. So long gone are the days where you can just write copy without looking at the search results. Instead, for every term, you have to actually look at the search results because sometimes the results will pivot massively and you realize you don't belong. I do a lot of stuff in the health space and it becomes really clear in the health space. So you'll, in a non-personalized fashion, using some of my tools, you can look at the search results and say, oh, wait, that's a consumer kind of pivoted or patient-oriented query, clearly, because it's got Healthline, WebMD, like all of the results are patient-oriented results where my clients are trying to target cardiologist or something, right? So somebody who's not a patient. So that's one of the things you need to do is be really clear about the words, the topics you're targeting, your competitors, your target audience, and that's where the whole plan gets built from. With a lot of the clients I work with, they don't have a huge concern or need to develop a brand voice and presence, but in more competitive spaces, that's essential because we all have short-term attention spans. And so if you don't stick out as a brand, then, people are just going to flip right past you. So you have to have a compelling story as a brand. And with some of my clients, I've had to do that kind of work with them, like be really clear about who they are. And for some of them that also, not the set I'm working with now, but with some of them that also applies to their website. Sometimes when you look at the website, you're like, I don't know what you do or who you are or why you're essential. So, but yeah, that's where the plan kind of builds from. The hardest thing that I think for people that have never done SEO, the hardest bit is trying to actually find those topics where they have a chance of appearing and picking them because there's a wide variety of things you could appear for, and doing that due diligence and research and actually figuring out this is the set of things that's perfect for me and I want to appear in Google search tends to be the thing that takes the longest for my clients to figure out.
Wow. And how many clients have you had in your whole ownership of this company or like in your agency?
Well, so before I started my own business, I was running the online marketing and analytics team at Ketchum, servicing their clients globally. So I started as a team of 1, ended up as a team of 9 over 5 years. And my first year, I touched 65 clients. 65 clients. And some of them were like, I was working with HHS, Office of the National Coordinator. I was also working with the Russian Federation and ConAgra. I mean, they weren't small brands, Cleveland Clinic, they were very big brands, but the volume of clients that I've touched now in my career, I've probably looked at least 200 Google Analytics accounts for 200 different brands, at least, if not maybe more at this point.
Oh my God. And it's been 5 years since you've had this company?
I've been on my own for 5 years, but previous to that, I was 5 years at Ketchum. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Well,
And between the two, it's at least 200 clients. I wouldn't say my current turnover is not that much. I have a lot of clients that have stuck with me, but at Ketchum, because I was part of this global, one day they were like, we want you to look at Ketchum Korea and help us figure out how to appear in Naver. I'm like, okay. Every day it was sort of a new out of the blue, like Kikkoman soy sauce, help us out. I'm like, okay.
oh my gosh.
And the industries were like, it was just across the board.
Are you hiring?
Well, that was at Ketchum. So that's a global PR agency. Yeah.
Yeah. So with your company, do you hire a lot of people or do you have kind of like a max of how many people you want on a team?
No, that's a big difference between my Ketchum experience and my current life. So, it was exhausting, to be honest, working at Ketchum. And I felt very burnt out near the end. And I realized that part of the reason that I was getting burnt out was actually the multitasking. It was trying to switch that many times throughout the day. And it just means you don't have enough time for deep thought, which I really want to do based on what I do. And so part of the reason I started my own business was to have control of my own schedule and the number of clients that I work on. So I keep a much smaller set. Like I said, I only have maybe 5 at a time, but they're bigger. They're big. I mean, there's plenty of work to do, but still only 5 brands, not 65 or whatever. And for the most part, it's just me. I have a couple subcontractors I bring on board, and some of them I bring on board on a regular basis for pretty much all my clients. I have a specialist that specializes in Wikipedia. I have one that works on Google Analytics and Google Tag Manager. I have a couple technical SEOs when I get to full and I need a little bit extra capacity. But my current business is more of a lifestyle business. I'm actually doing it because I love doing what I'm doing, but I also want to live a life.
Mm.
Yeah.
Me too. Me too.
Yeah.
So what are some obstacles that you overcame when starting up this company and serving 200 clients?
So with my current business, I don't know the client set total number since I started. It's not 200. The 200 is definitely including Ketchum. Let's see. I mean, starting any business, it's sort of building a pipeline and clearly knowing what you want to do, I think was a big part of it. Though I was very lucky because I ran those DC search marketing meetups for about 6 years. When I decided I wanted to start my own business, I literally just told my network, and within about a week, I had my first client, which is awesome. And it was just a referral, which is this industry is, it's all referral based. So it was a referral from a friend of mine. And wouldn't you know, it was a car buying and selling website in Saudi Arabia. And the people who hired me were out of Dubai. Of course, that would be my first client. And it was, millions of pages, it was a huge site. But yeah, so I mean, keeping a steady stream of clients and then being really clear about, I think when you're running your own business, it's harder to make sure you're clear about what clients you want, especially if you're a little bit slower and not picking up ones just because you're sort of looking for income. So I think that's been a learning experience for me over the last 5 years. I've gotten much stronger about saying no, even if it's a decent amount of money, because I just know that the people involved might not be a good fit with me. I have a certain personality. I work best with other certain personalities, frankly. Or I just don't care about the mission. That's really hard. I did a lot of that at Ketchum where I could care less about what they're doing. I much rather, because I worked in nonprofits for a decade. And so I'm not working with nonprofits now. Most of them can't afford me, but I am working with organizations where I appreciate their mission. That helps a lot.
Yeah. How can someone get started in this field?
So that's both the easiest part and the hardest part. So there's no educational program that will teach you how to be an SEO, unfortunately. There are plenty of online resources though. And you don't need a degree actually to get a job in SEO either. You just need to experiment on a website, or you can volunteer for a nonprofit. But either way, show that you can actually drive results on a website, and then you could pitch that to like an SEO agency and they'll probably get hired, frankly. So I hired a lot of people directly out of college on my team at Ketchum, and then I just trained them in SEO. So depending on where you are, that might also be an option. They were paid internships, but you could just get training directly from an SEO agency, and then there you go. There's your career. But yeah, there's not enough of us in the industry. So it's really too bad that nobody teaches it, but it's because it changes so fast that it's really hard to teach in a university setting. You could get, however, for instance, Georgetown, I think it's a graduate program, but they have a certificate in digital marketing that's very stellar. And that would give you a good basis. And then there's General Assembly here in DC, which I think is doing stuff online now. Really great classes. So there's definitely places where you could buy things or buy certificates and classes that would make sense, but you don't actually need to particularly get into a 4-year degree. Though I think the interdisciplinary program at Hampshire was great for me because SEO is very interdisciplinary. So it's writing, it's data, it's technology, it's UX, it's psychology. So it goes across quite a few disciplines, which I think is why it's a good fit for me.
And you said that you hire people that just graduated college. So what are like some main qualities you look at for someone? Oh, pardon. That was really awkward. Sorry. What do you look in a person
Yeah, that's okay.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. So
Okay.
while I was at Ketchum, I was looking for folks that had the raw material that would make them successful in the digital marketing industry. Yeah. So I would hire what I call kids directly out of college that had an interest but no background, and I would train them. Yeah. I don't do that currently, but I did a lot of that at Ketchum. I did that with a couple of the nonprofits prior to that. So there is a unique piece of DNA that I think is important. So I don't really want to train somebody in digital marketing where it's not a good fit, because if it's not a good fit, you're frankly going to be miserable. But if it is a good fit, I'm really excited to get you in the industry and excited about it, right? So a couple of the things I figured out over the years that are essential. One is the ability to self-learn, Google stuff and know it's accurate. So find the accurate source of information. So one of the things that I used to do was an open book test, which is weird because Google, my undergrad is anti-testing, but I used to do an open book test, and I expected you to use Google to figure it out. And one of the questions that I would ask is, what is a quality score? Which is actually something for paid ads, but it has a very clear definition, and I expect you to go find it. And the number of people who made something up, just high number. It was, to this day, it makes me giggle, because you just go find the dang answer from Google and just repeat the answer to me. That's all I want. But it really highlighted, like, those people just got right, because like if you can't get the accurate answer, then you're just not going to be good in this industry. The other thing I would have them do is I would give a graph of Google Analytics data and have them tell me what it said just by looking at it, and then tell me what it doesn't say and what they might actually want as like the next question to dig in deeper, because I wanted to get that interest and that thinking from a data perspective, because that's essential to being involved in SEO. And then the last part is I would test their writing, because I cannot teach people in a work environment quick enough about how to be a powerful writer. But you have to be a good writer to be doing SEO work. And so I would just have them write a pitch letter to build a link from a website, and then write a personal essay. And between the two, I could figure out if they had decent writing skills, basically.
I feel like if I were to take that open test, I'm a natural improviser. I would fail because I would put like a really bad pun in there. I think it's funny, and then it's like, no, like, no. So that sounds like that's a really enjoyable part, just like finding people who are really into this passion as you are. Would you say that's the best part of this work?
Yeah, I'm a little odd in that way, in that a lot of agencies have a different way of picking up clients. But for me, the part that I find the most personally fulfilling, which would be easy to fulfill if I was in-house somewhere, but I love grabbing raw talent and giving them a career in digital marketing. I love doing that. I've done that for 16 different people. One is the head of entertainment partnerships for Facebook and Instagram. He was the digital marketing director for Sony Music Entertainment. One ended up becoming the head of brand for Reddit. 3 of them now are at Google. I mean, like, just a lot of them are at search companies, digital marketing companies. So all of them found their love, their home in digital marketing. They've got vibrant careers. It's great. So I love that. But running my own business as a lifestyle business, it's a little bit challenging to fit that in. So instead, what I do is I pick clients where they really need to build in-house capacity. And I think they've got the gumption to be interested in what I'm doing, basically. And so what I do is I help them hire in-house talent or build up current talent that they've got to lead the SEO program. So for National Cancer Institute, I help them source and hire an SEO. They're now at 1.5 or 2 SEOs. And so for the agencies I'm working with now, that's what I'm doing. The folks I'm working with like to learn about SEO with me. And so that becomes part of their skill set.
Now to do a 180, what's your least favorite part about this work?
Some of the really manual pieces. I'm not, so when I was going to school for my undergrad, I had a part-time job at a CPA firm, and most of what I was supposed to be doing, which was mine, was answering the phone and stapling tax returns. Fine. Well, at one point they wanted me on the typewriter. This kind of dates me, but I was supposed to be on a typewriter and literally typing up, like, I think it was an invoice, payment invoice or something. And then they wanted me to proof to make sure that the period was in the right spot. Yeah. Okay. That level of detail turns out I suck at. I'm really bad. I'm really bad. So, and I will admit that when I go for in-house interviews, I'm just like, editing my own work, like anything that's crazy detail oriented coding, for instance. I thought I was going to be a web developer when I first moved to DC, and I was part of this Cold Fusion class. And Cold Fusion, because it's the only thing that was offered. But anyway, Cold Fusion, if you have a missing piece of punctuation, the whole damn thing doesn't load. It's awful. It's awful. So anyway, I am not that personality. And so stuff like that, I'm not happy doing. But I have two virtual assistants that take some of that load off of my plate. So I try not to do that kind of stuff as much as possible.
Were they really that picky about where the period would be?
Yes. Yes.
Oh my God.
Yes.
Yeah, I feel so like I said, I'm a natural improviser. I just kind of go with the flow. I would forget about that period. I'd be like, oh, I'll like put an exclamation point instead or something like that. Be like, oh, that was supposed to be there. Yeah.
Well,
So
I mean, there's a lot of math involved in what I do.
yeah.
Obviously, you're delivering results and stuff. And I just have coping mechanisms. So I just make sure I've got a second set of eyes for a lot of things and that kind of thing. But it's not the part I like the most. The part I like the most is I like the troubleshooting. There's a lot of troubleshooting in what I do. There's a lot of figuring it out from scratch, which I love. There's a lot of writing creatively, which I like to do too, and then training people and getting those light bulb moments. That part I love. And perpetually training, like reading new information, absorbing it, and training it right back to your clients is like a steady part of what I do. So it just works out well. It's all the stuff I love to do.
Yeah. So what type of so like one thing that I struggle with personally, and I think it's very common among college students, is to really adapt to being more detail oriented. Because I've noticed, especially in the media industry, that's extremely important to be detail oriented, especially when you are, going live for a TV show. Like, you don't want anything to be messed up. So, do you have any advice to like be more on top of things when it comes to like creating content or, coding, anything like that?
Coping mechanisms. I mean, you just got to come up with your own personal set of things that you do that help you cope. And so I'm a checklist person. I'm a huge list person. I got Trello boards for miles. I don't assume I'm going to remember anything. I write everything down. I got checklists for my podcast. Like we literally have a checklist for everything so we don't forget it. Um, Especially when you're doing as many things as I'm doing, if you don't write it down and also tell your VAs to remind you or whatever, those kind of things, your whole world is going to fall apart really quickly. So those are my mechanisms, but I think you should come up with whatever yours are. And when it comes to going live or doing something, practicing, good old fashioned practicing helps quite a bit too, between that and lists.
Yeah, it sounds like your work is very team oriented. Like do you look for that aspect in students too that are interested in this industry?
A little bit. I mean, personally, that's the part that I find I'm not perfect at, and which means it's an area of growth, I think, for everybody. But it's also the part that fascinates me. So again, it's that interpersonal psychology part. So I could have a beautiful plan, but I have to convince in-house content people, and sometimes they have to convince the technology development people, which are a very different personality set. If you just think about like who would be sitting on a writing team and what their loves and stuff might be, and who would be sitting on a development team or managing the servers, right? It's like a wide variety of people. And so thinking through how to pivot your message so that it's heard, I think is huge. And part of the reason I worked at Ketchum is that I was following my boss there, Tim Weinheimer. And because I knew when I got that job this 10 years ago, I did not have enough soft skills. And I thought he had soft skills for miles. He does. He still does. And so on purpose, I picked him as a boss. I literally followed him around. I interviewed at different jobs somewhere else. He ends up at Ketchum. I interview with him again because I'm like, I want you to be my boss. And one of the things we spent the most time doing, since we were an internal team to the global Ketchum, so we had to sell doing digital marketing to all of these PR people at Ketchum. And oftentimes we would be a bit disruptive because we want to do something radically different than what the PR people wanted to do because we knew it might be more effective, et cetera. And when we had an idea that we were trying to sell through, we would spend hours, seriously, sometimes hours, brainstorming how to package it and how to sell it in the meeting based on the personalities around the table. And we do like feedback. Oh, don't say that because so-and-so is not going to hear you if you say that. I mean, literally that much work to sort of sell through stuff internally, which would then be sold externally. And sometimes that's what you need to do. Most people don't feel like you have to spend that much time packaging your message, but to be effective, sometimes you do. It depends on how, the personalities around the table. But if you've got personalities around the table where you know you're going to be up against that challenge, instead of just sort of railroading through your first way of presenting, you should really breathe, take a step back, and think about how you're packaging your message, even in an internal meeting.
Wow. Yeah. How would you say, especially when you are working with so many personalities in a team, how do you evolve and improve your work for the betterment of your company or just any client you're working for?
Yeah, I mean, so part of what I'm doing, this is the other reason why I'm launching my podcast where I get to interview other people in the industry, is that I really felt like when I was running the search marketing meetups, I got great feedback from other people about that. Because the industry talks a lot about trying a new tactic or measuring things in a different way, but they don't talk as much about the soft skills part. Like, so what were the steps you actually did to sell that through? So for instance, when I was at Ketchum, we were working to promote electronic health records. Part of the original plan was running paid ads. But at that point, the federal government wasn't running a lot of paid ads on Google. And so we had to sell through to the HHS team our original strategy of running paid ads on Google. Now, here's the thing. They were targeting doctors. Doctors, a third of them click on paid ads. For the rest of us, it's 0.3% or something. A third of them click on paid ads. So clearly you have to run paid ads if that's your target audience. Anyway, I think we tried to sell it through 5 to 7 times before it was actually approved. So that internal meeting, we would like sit back down. Who's going to be around the table? How are we going to talk about it this way? Are we bringing a Google rep in? Are we taking them to Google? We literally came up with 7 different ways over, mind you, a 3-year period, but still 7 different ways. So a little bit of tenacity, a little bit of thinking through the personal persuasion part.
Wow.
And then receiving feedback from the client, right? So, okay, trying to source out whether or not that worked. And if not, what was the feedback we got and maybe how we could repackage that into persuasion presentation number 3. Yeah. Welcome to working with the federal government too. You have to have a love of like perpetually reminding them about things you want them to do, because sometimes it's just they move slow. There's a lot of people involved. There's red tape,
Mm-hmm. That stressed me out so much just listening to that.
Yeah.
But it's so interesting though. So what do you think the future of this field is? Like, do you think AI will change SEO?
I mean, AI is a part of SEO. Still, it has been for quite a few years. So yeah, I think probably at least 8 years ago. You can see my daughter in the background.
Oh, hi.
At least 8 years ago, I did a presentation on personalization in social networks. And at that point, Google was definitely personalizing their networks and using various forms of artificial intelligence. But now it's blatantly used across every social media platform. If you've not read the book, The Filter Bubble by Eli Pariser, you should read The Filter Bubble. And little known fact, I used to babysit Eli back in the day, randomly. He grew up in Maine too. But it's a great book. And it basically talks, unfortunately, about how we're all in our own little bubble. It's just a reality. And so the impact as a marketer is that means you cannot launch a campaign without knowing who you're talking to, because who they are and their beliefs and who they hang out with and where they hang out, all of that is going to impact whether or not you're going to be ultimately found by your end user. I mean, at this point, Google is talking about building out personalized knowledge graphs per user on your device. And if you have an Android, you're already potentially using Google Discover, where they surface information for you without searching. And they do that based on your reading habits and logging into your Google account and possibly everything they know about you in your Google account, which is quite a bit. So the goal is to surface information without you even searching. And part of it is because They have had a futuristic inventor of AI, and has a lot of other patents to his name. Ray Kurzweil has been at Google for more than a decade, I think, at this point. And Ray firmly believes that at some point we'll be cyborgs. We'll have chips in our head. And he really wants to eliminate the pain of searching. So if you wonder where voice search comes from, or Discover, where you're getting information that's perfect for you without that pain of searching, some of it comes from Ray's vision. So if you want to do anything in this space, you should read up about Ray Kurzweil, because he still works at Google. And while his stuff seems like it's way off in left field, I actually think it's a good indication of where a lot of these companies are going. And it's not just Google. Apple's hiring AI people. Bing has AI people. Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, all of them.
So we're going to turn into cyborgs.
I don't know if we're all going to have chips in our head, but I do think we will have information presented that seems creepy, right? That's at the perfect moment on our phone. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, like, people, like, I don't know what country it is, but that just kind of reminded that people, like, would have a chip in their hand and they use it to, like, unlock and lock their door.
Mexico.
So it's in Mexico?
Yeah, I think it was the health department of Mexico.
Oh.
Yeah. I mean, we microchip our pets. It's not.
Oh, yeah. Good point.
I
have a pet right there. I was like,
I'm just saying, if you're in a high security environment, it's not too weird to think you might get a tiny little microchip as a security pass.
That'd be fun. I just want to Google things with my eyes. I'm looking forward to that. I want to be a candidate for that. So do you have any advice for, I think I already, pardon. So it seems like you already have a lot on your plate going on with, the newsletter, the podcast. What else would you like to do if you could?
Oh, probably write a book. I just don't know what the book would be about. But in relation to a life goal, probably write a book. And it's always been a tiny little goal of mine to be a TED speaker. But again, don't know what I would be speaking about.
Cyborgs.
Maybe, yeah.
That's really interesting, though. What did you? Did you say what type of book you'd like to write, or it's still up in the air?
No, I don't have an idea for either, which means neither one is getting worked on, but that's okay.
That's fine.
I mean, at the moment, all the things I'm doing now are because I already need to inform my clients about updates. So I might as well inform the rest of the world, because I'm reading this stuff anyway. And then it forces me to read it because people are now relying on me to educate them, right? So, I mean, there's a reason I sort of did the bits and pieces. And then the tips are, stuff I'm reading. And then the podcast gets me a chance. I'm an extrovert. I work at home. I worked at home prior to COVID. So it gives me a chance to chat with people, partially.
Yeah. I had one other question. Darn, what was it? Oh, yeah. So you are a very successful person. I think that is very accurate to say. How did it feel to be able to help so many websites gain so much traffic? Like the Cancer.gov, they had 5 million searches a month, correct?
Well, I mean, first of all, they're .gov.
Pardon.
It's not like all of that was me per se, but they did bring me on board because the head of communications over there had a sense that they weren't getting as much traffic as they should get. And I agreed with him. And so what I was helping them do for the first year or two was build out internal capacity, come up with a change management campaign, because that website has 150 different subdomains run by different departments on different CMS systems. So they don't manage all those different subdomains necessarily centrally. So they had to come up with a campaign to coordinate those folks. So a lot of interpersonal persuasion kind of stuff. And then just blocking and tackling, just getting SEO a part of their DNA. So now I've lost the train of thought. What was your original question? I'm sorry.
Oh, what were your emotions when you noticed that your work was helping?
So part of it is more the fact that they're not one of my clients right now. That's the part that I find exciting, which is weird because I realize it's not the best business model, I suppose, but they're doing it on their own. that's the part I find that's exciting. Some of the stuff that I convinced them to do, in fact, I think they told me probably about 8 months ago, they finally implemented something from one of my technology audits. It took them that long to implement something, but it worked. So intermittently they tell me, hey, we finally implemented something, and it did, it worked, it increased traffic. That's awesome. And they're running on their own. They've got SEOs in house. That's amazing. That's awesome. So that's the part that I get more excited. This is the other reason for the podcast. I kind of get more excited about other people's successes than mine. Yeah. I know that seems weird, but
no, I think also the fact that you do mentor students, I think that's that's a really good sign, especially if you're teaching other people this line of work. But I think that's very normal. Like, I get excited when like I work at a radio station and I'm able to help people, like, create KTs and PSAs and actually get their voice on the air. So if I'm able to have someone get into it and learn more about it and really just make their own market, I feel like a gold star. That was really like cheesy, but it's definitely a very satisfactory feeling that you are doing something that's beneficial to your community. So we have another question. Do you think the web and its parts are as efficient as possible now? And what would you change if they aren't?
No, I mean, I think the filter bubble is problematic. Like, I know why it's been built, but the fact that we have such a tight filter bubble as we do now is part of the reason why you've got conspiracy theories flying around the internet. So that's problematic. I also think there's not enough regulation for the big search engines or the social media platforms. I think there should be a lot more, particularly if I go back to the SEO space at Google. Google is increasingly working on providing more Google resources than Google search versus directing traffic to websites. In some instances, they've sort of been caught scraping information from websites and then just providing it directly to people, so sometimes they provide instant answers. Sometimes they provide most of the answer in search so that people don't have a reason to click through. Sometimes they build things like Google Flights, taking Expedia out of the market altogether, because suddenly you can find information about flights directly in Google search. So when they move into an industry, I think the industry needs to be concerned. They're doing some stuff in the health space, for instance, that I've told some of my health clients about that I think are concerning. There's just not enough regulation at all. And there's not enough competition. So I think both of those are problematic. But with the current folks who are in Congress and their level of tech savviness, I don't know what's going to happen with that problem, because I think maybe their staff know enough to inform them about why it might be problematic, but I don't think that a lot of people in Congress really understand it enough to regulate it.
Can you become a member of Congress?
Yeah, no.
Oh, okay.
I've lived in DC for too long. No.
Yeah. That reminded me. I remember when Mark Zuckerberg was under fire about, like selling data, like people's data to third-party websites. And there are just all those people in DC asking him, like, what's a cookie? Explain a cookie. And he's like, okay. Yeah. And they're just like asking it, but like in different phrasing. So, that's who's in charge.
Yeah, I mean, one of the other things that Google is doing, especially on mobile devices, is obviously they're in the market to make money off their advertising. But for some results, you'll see so many ads, the free stuff, the organic is so far down the page. And so for all of my clients, even though I've spent my entire career for the most part in the organic space, the free part of Google, I'm encouraging everybody to create a plan for paid advertising, or just go ahead and launch paid advertising, because it's very quickly becoming a pay-to-play type space. Even for federal agencies, the amount of space that you're going to be found is it's shrinking.
So you said that you work on like platforms such as Google and YouTube and LinkedIn. Do you also work with social media outlets such as Snapchat and Instagram?
Yeah, a little bit. I suggest those platforms for my clients when their target audience is on those platforms, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. With the folks that I'm working with now, 2 of them, their target audiences aren't even on those platforms. with the federal agency, they're thinking of launching something where maybe some of that would make sense. So again, it kind of depends on where your target audience is. Personally, for my own business, even though most of the American public's not on Twitter, SEOs are on Twitter. And so my plan involves Twitter. And does it involve Instagram for my business? No. So it all depends on where you need to be based on your target audience, and not all of the platforms make sense. Wow. I have a band. I don't really encourage them to be on Twitter. I mean, there's reporters on Twitter, sure, but they should spend way more time on their YouTube channel than they should. Band? So I have a band that I help in exchange for tickets because I'm a huge fan. They're called the Ashima Brothers, and you should check them out on Spotify. They sound great, and they're going to be really hot at some point.
What type of genre? Genre is it? Folk?
Kind of like folk, but some of it sounds like they have this one song that when I saw them live, I was like, "Ooh, that's like a future Maroon 5." And yeah, well, and the other thing is, my husband plays in the President's Own Marine Band, so he's a professional musician, and he has perfect pitch, and he liked them too, which is a big deal because they have to be good for my husband to like them. So he's a fan too.
Wow. Yeah. I'm always looking for new music recommendations. Like I have a radio show where I look into different genres across the US, and I'm in a bluegrass band.
Oh, I love bluegrass.
It's great. It's great. I'm learning the banjo and everything. Yeah, I love it. Yeah, I want to be a yodeler. No, I don't. So Jeff had a question. Do you think TikTok will be a significant social media marketing tool as well?
You know, I used to get those questions all the time at Ketchum because being a PR agency, whatever the shiniest thing was, people get all excited about, whether it was Vine or whatever. And I'm a little old school, I have to admit, because most of the time when I'm working with clients, they haven't dedicated enough resources to the platforms they're on. And so I don't usually encourage people to go after the most recent thing because it most of the time doesn't make the most sense. So for instance, the amount of time and effort you have to put into YouTube to be found on YouTube, which is this second largest search engine in the world, right behind Google. So it's huge for discovery, and you have to put in a huge amount of time in, and it appears in Google search for queries. So most of the time I tell people spend more time on YouTube, right? Spend more time there than a platform that also has personalization, but has a lot less users, and it's only skewed toward a certain demographic, where YouTube at this point, everybody uses YouTube, right? It's for every demographic. So again, it kind of depends on your target audience, I suppose, but that's most, like even with the band was like, oh, I want to do TikTok. And I was like, you need to do more with YouTube. YouTube and Spotify pay you. Yeah. So you should be doing more there. Maybe not the TikTok, because, if there's only one of you, you get very fractured. And I've even seen big brands where they just get so fractured. And when you actually measure, that's the other thing. Most of the time people aren't measuring. And so they're like, oh, I'm doing great. And I was like, well, if you actually measured how many people go from those social platforms over to your website and purchase something, if that's your end goal, and most of the time they haven't. I'm like, well, then when you actually start measuring that, you're like, hey, I should cut out these social platforms. I'm spending all this time over there and it's not generating anything, right? So anyway, that's my beef about the newest platform. Most of the time I tell people to double down on the ones that are kind of like known, well used, not executed on well enough, that kind of thing.
Yeah, no, I think that's very, very reliable information, because I have a TikTok, but the advertisements I see, they don't really catch my eye, because it's just someone going, and then there's a caption and it goes, click here, and it's just like, oh, you only got like 15 seconds to say something, man. Like,
it, again, depends on your goal, but like Pinterest is known to drive traffic back to websites. That's actually what the social platform does. Now, Facebook does not. It'll hide posts. It wants to keep people on Facebook. And so when you try to put a post up that drives people back to your website, it's going to be less effective, actually. And it possibly won't be seen by people that are following your brand page. So like knowing the algorithm behind the social platform, I think would really be helpful when you're trying to pick what platform. So again, like back to my federal agency, I'm like, why aren't you doing more in Pinterest? Do more in Pinterest. It will drive people back to your website where they'll discover more of your mission and more of your pages, etc. It's part of its algorithm is to drive people back to your website. Anyway, so that's my little beef about because there half the time there's like one poor person trying to manage 7 social platforms. It never makes sense from a staffing perspective.
Yeah. So what would you say to a person who is Like, would you say to a person who's trying to start up their own business to always just go straight to either Google or YouTube for all of their marketing needs in Pinterest and just
No,
kind of,
I think when you figure out your target customer and you figure out how they find out about uh, new products or services, that will drive your marketing plan. So for my own business, even with the big search agencies, almost everybody, and there's been studies, you can obviously you can Google it, but almost everybody in the SEO space gets clients via referral. So sure, we should optimize our website so that we don't look like we don't know what we're talking about. But SEO is also a very competitive space. And so ranking top for anything is almost impossible because some people have been doing this since 1994 and their websites are still up. You know what I mean? So it's hard to rank in the SEO space for a lot of these topics. It's very competitive, but does it really matter? Most of the time, the leads that come through my website aren't qualified. It's not useful. It doesn't turn into business. It's most of the time it's just not helpful. Whereas the things that come via referral, helpful. So what do? I remind my network. I have an email that goes out to my network twice a year with an update, a real update. I've been bad this year because of COVID, but usually I try to have little catch-up coffees with people in my network. I try to go back to the SEO community and provide support to the SEO community. I hang out in Slack channels because you get referrals there. I mean, so my entire marketing strategy is pivoted around where my target customer could potentially come from, which is referrals. So so I don't really have an active YouTube channel.
wow, that was extremely helpful. Wow, because
it's funny too, because my VA is like, oh, I forget what she was suggesting, whether it's, I want to say it might've been Instagram or something, but she was suggesting a new social platform. And I was like, nope, Twitter. Yes. The other ones, no. It's not where my work would come from potentially.
yeah. So I think we have 3 minutes left. Do you have anything else to say or any advice for college students during this crazy time and trying to find, a job? That was really blunt. But but do you have any advice for people trying to get into this field and they're feeling overwhelmed with everything going on around them?
So I think the positive is that for you to get a job in SEO, you don't actually need a degree. If you're in the DC market, probably, because everybody here has got 3 law degrees, it feels like. So it depends on what city you're in. But generally, to be hired on an SEO team, you have to prove that you've got that DNA stuff I was talking about and that you've been able to help somebody else grow. So if you have time in your hands right now, I would go find a nonprofit and volunteer for them and help build traffic to their website and write up a case study and then pitch yourself to a real job. Frankly, that would be the exact plan that I would put in place. And if you're interested in becoming really marketable and you like the data part of things, almost everybody uses Google Analytics, and there's free training from Google in the Google Analytics Academy. You can just Google that, go through the training. There's also a Google Analytics Certified IQ exam, which means you're certified in Google Analytics. And frankly, if you get certified, which is all free, I think the test is even free. And if you get certified, you put it on your resume, you'll get a job. Basically, because there's not enough people that are interested in data analytics that are qualified and certified. So you can do all of that for free on the internet. The other thing is that Google has, I just did this in one of my newsletters. It's probably actually in an SEO tip too, but Google has a variety of certifications they've launched because of COVID that are also cheap or free. And one is a project management certification, which normally you really have to pay for. And if that floats your boat, that's a very marketable skill too. So,
wow.
You can train yourself for free right now at home and potentially get a job. I mean, you might, in the SEO space, you might need to prove yourself. So you might, again, go find the local animal shelter and help drive traffic to their website. Even the people that I hired on my team straight from college, that's what I was looking at. It was in college, this one girl, she helped her local, it was her sorority or something. And she managed their social media, but then she measured it. She said, I was able to grow my YouTube channel from X to this. And we did this, this, and this. And I was like, perfect. I'm hiring you. It's that initiative and the measurement part that is big. I had another junior person who came onto my team with no experience. And he, in the interview, said that he had noticed Ketchum was checking out his website in his Google Analytics. And I was like, oh, I'm going to hire you. You actually knew how to check your Google Analytics for IP. And, and you knew that Ketchum was taking a look. That's great. That kind of stuff. But it's because he had a website. Actually, most people I hire on my team had their own personal websites and turned on Google Analytics, which is all free.
Wow.
And that shows initiative.
You are actually blowing my mind right now. I feel like you just unlocked the riddle on how to be successful online.
Well, and you can join these Slack communities. They're not limited to anybody else. So there's a technology, women in tech SEO Slack group and Facebook group that's super supportive. It's just for women in the SEO space. There's also Online Geniuses, which is a Slack group that has a wide variety of people that have joined it. Some junior, some more senior, and it's social media plus paid plus organic. It's the whole gamut of stuff. There's an analytics Slack where you can learn about analytics. All these people are actually really helpful too, by the way. I go in there, I help people, but then I also sometimes go in with questions of my own, and people will, for free, with their own time, help me troubleshoot stuff. I had this one guy, this is maybe about a year ago now, but I was in the Slack group and I was doing log file analysis for the first time. And he was like, let's hop on the phone. And for free, he just showed me how to use Screaming Frog's log file analyzer. It was amazing.
Wow. Well, Catherine, we are out of time, but thank you so much. This was extremely informational and very helpful, I'm sure, to many people watching. This was a real honor for me.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah, you're welcome. But yeah, thank you for everyone for tuning in. This was Worldly Experience.